evening. 2,300 kilometers. That is the distance between northern Venezuela and Miami. Flight time for a modern cruise missile at subsonic speed, 11 minutes. Flight time for a ballistic missile on a depressed trajectory, 7 minutes. These numbers did not matter last week. These numbers were theoretical, academic, the kind of calculations defense analysts run during peacetime exercises and then file away because the scenarios seem too improbable to warrant serious planning. But those numbers matter now, because Russia just positioned systems in Venezuela that turned theoretical into operational. And major American cities just entered a threat envelope they have not faced since the Cold War. The discovery began with routine satellite surveillance, overhead imagery of Venezuelan military installations, standard monitoring that intelligence agencies conduct constantly across regions of interest. One image showed cargo on an airstrip outside Caracas, large, rectangular, covered partially with tarps. Analysts flagged it for standard processing. Initial assessment suggested industrial equipment. Venezuela receives shipments constantly. Most are mundane. But this particular configuration did not match known patterns for commercial cargo. The dimensions were wrong. The thermal signature suggested climate-controlled transport, and the security perimeter around the cargo was inconsistent with civilian logistics. Enhanced imaging revealed more. When analysts zoomed in, when they applied spectral filtering, when they cross-referenced the shape against databases of military hardware, the identification was unmistakable. Russian missile launcher components, not old Soviet-era systems, not obsolete hardware being dumped on a desperate ally. Modern platforms, the same systems Russia deploys in Europe, the same systems capable of carrying multiple warhead types, the same systems designed for rapid deployment, concealment, and operation in hostile electromagnetic environments. The first image alone was alarming, but satellite passes 6 hours later confirmed something worse. The components were no longer separate. They were assembled. Russian technicians, identified through subsequent intelligence gathering, were conducting systems checks. Venezuelan military personnel were present but appeared to be observing, not operating. This was not a training scenario. This was not Venezuela receiving weapons it would control. This was Russian military infrastructure being established on Venezuelan soil, with Caracas providing territory, security, and political cover. Inside the Pentagon, reaction was immediate. Northern Command, responsible for Homeland Defense, elevated monitoring protocols. Intelligence agencies began emergency reconstruction of how these systems arrived without triggering earlier alerts. Naval assets in the Caribbean received new tasking orders, and classified briefings moved up the chain to National Security Council level within hours. Because the implications of Russian missiles in Venezuela extend far beyond the immediate military threat. They represent a fundamental shift in hemispheric security that undermines assumptions American defense planning has rested on for generations. The Western Hemisphere has been considered American strategic space since the Monroe Doctrine. Not through formal empire, but through overwhelming power projection capability that made challenging U.S. dominance in the region unthinkable for any rival. Russia could not sustain military presence here. China lacked the reach. No power could contest American control of approaches to U.S. territory. That assumption just collapsed. Russia demonstrated it can move strategic systems into the hemisphere, can position them, can protect them through Venezuelan sovereign cover. and can threaten American cities from distances that compress warning time to minutes. From Moscow's perspective, this move is symmetrical response. Russia sees U.S. missile systems in Poland and Romania, sees NATO infrastructure expanding toward Russian borders, sees weapons flowing to Ukraine that strike Russian territory. And Russia concludes that if the United States can position threats near Russian homeland, Russia can position threats near American homeland. This is not aggression, this is balancing. This is what great powers do when they feel encircled. They find pressure points. They create vulnerabilities in the adversary's security architecture. They force the adversary to experience the same strategic anxiety they themselves feel. But from Washington's perspective, Russian presence in Venezuela looks destabilizing. It looks like Moscow exporting confrontation into a region that should remain stable. It looks like Russia taking advantage of Venezuelan economic collapse to establish military foothold that threatens American security. And when both sides see the same action through opposite lenses, when both believe they act defensively while the other acts offensively, the conditions for crisis intensify. Venezuela's motivations are equally clear. The Maduro government faces sustained pressure from Washington, economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, support for opposition forces. Maduro needs protection, and Russia offers something the United States cannot tolerate easily: a military presence that makes regime change operations exponentially more dangerous. Because now any action against Maduro risks confrontation with Russian forces. Any strike on Venezuelan government facilities risks hitting Russian personnel. Any escalation in Venezuela risks triggering responses from Moscow that could spiral beyond the hemisphere. This is strategic insurance for Maduro. Russian missiles are not just weapons, they are shields. They are guarantees that Washington must think carefully before pressuring Caracas too hard. And Maduro paid for that insurance by providing Russia something equally valuable: geographic access, launch positions, surveillance sites, logistics support, and political legitimacy through sovereign invitation that complicates any American response. The systems themselves represent serious capability. Intelligence assessments suggest Russia deployed Caliber cruise missiles, possibly Iskander-M ballistic systems. Caliber can fly low, evade radar, and strike targets over 1,500 kilometers distant. Iskander-M provides shorter range but higher speed and maneuvering capability that defeats certain missile defenses. Both systems are dual capable. Both can carry conventional or nuclear warheads. And that dual capability creates the most dangerous ambiguity. Because in crisis, when these systems activate, American early warning cannot determine warhead type until impact. And that uncertainty compresses decision-making to impossible timescales. Range calculations show that southeastern United States, Gulf Coast installations, Caribbean territories all fall within coverage. Major population centers, critical infrastructure, naval bases, air stations, energy facilities, targets that were previously beyond Russian conventional strike capability without crossing oceans or violating airspace of multiple nations. But from Venezuela, those targets become accessible. And accessibility changes deterrence equations fundamentally. The American public does not see what happens inside classified briefing rooms, does not see analysts calculating blast radii against population density, does not see war planners modeling evacuation scenarios for coastal cities, does not see communications specialists testing emergency alert systems that have not been activated seriously since the one 1,966.
Now we can't pull them out, so they get